Welcome to Swimway Africa YouTube series. It is a pilot series on this program, and on the pilot series, we have been interacting with experts in various regions across Africa who are working on protecting the migratory fish species in their locality. And joining me on this episode is Dr. Frank Masese from Kenya. He is a senior lecturer at the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences at the University of Eldoret, Kenya. As a matter of fact, he studies the effects of human activities and land use change on aquatic biodiversity and ecosystem functioning, and of course, with a focus on streams and rivers. He's working on such research topics, including fish ecology, organic matter processing, and food webs, as well as biomonitoring. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Frank on this episode. Welcome, sir, to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure and it's an honor to host you on our pilot series, because we know that it is very important that we preserve, conserve, and protect our water bodies. And you would be helping us learn more about our roles, especially, achieving that. So on this episode with Dr. Frank, we would be learning about environmental flows and the status of migratory fish in the Lake Victoria Basin in Kenya, which of course is one of his major interests, because according to Dr. Frank, he's working on other aspects of fisheries especially. So yes, Dr. Frank, my first question would be to tell us a bit about the migration in the Lake Victoria Basin, migrations from the lake into the rivers.
Yes, thank you for once again. As I've introduced, is that we are doing some works in the rivers draining into Lake Victoria. And Lake Victoria is the second largest freshwater lake in the world, with several rivers draining the Eastern African countries of Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, and Kenya to Lake Victoria. So we concentrate, mostly our team concentrates on the Kenyan part. So fish migrations are important, although this is unique migration from freshwater to freshwater. So we find that these fishes are moving from the Lake Victoria into the influent rivers, mainly for reproduction. You realize in the rainy season, because as water is moving from the catchments with a lot of organic matter and food, so the fishes also are aware of this cycle of movements of material from the catchments. They move into rivers for two main reasons. One, access habitats and food for reproduction. And so once the young ones return back into the lake for growth. That's what is happening in the rivers. So we need to maintain this connectivity between the lake and the rivers to maintain fish populations, both in the rivers and in the lake. So that's how these migrations are happening.
You mentioned something really interesting, migration from freshwater to freshwater, because the lakes are freshwater and the rivers are freshwater. And because we'll be talking about migratory fish, a lot of people may have concluded that migratory fish are usually, diadromous. It means they could move from saltwater to freshwater and from freshwater to saltwater. But here you are talking about migrations from freshwater to freshwater. So what type of migration could this be?
Yeah, this is, we call it potamodromous fishing migrations. Okay. So they move it from lower areas of rivers or dams all lakes into the upstream areas of the rivers.
Oh, okay.
And because of changing in environmental conditions, mostly the migrations occur mostly during the rainy season. This coincides with changes in the input of food items like organic matter from the catchment. Also water temperature, very critical for the catfishes because they need the low water temperatures coming in from the catchment during the rains is like a key for reproduction. It stimulates their reproduction. And we do this in aquaculture. We are learning these techniques that if you flood a pond with catfishes, actually you stimulate their reproduction. So it's the same thing that is happening with rivers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So I think sometime last year you did a presentation on fish species in the Lake Victoria Basin, and I happened to see a picture why or part of your presentation states that there are about 75 species of fish that occur in the rivers of the Lake Victoria Basin. And then there's also a point here that there are newly introduced species. Is there a reason why these new species are being introduced into the lake?
Yeah, Lake Victoria actually is said to be suffered the greatest loss of biodiversity of several fish species because of the introduction of these exotic species, mainly Nile perch. Nile perch is a fish introduced from River Nile, the White Nile, into Lake Victoria.
Okay.
And the main reason for its introduction is that, we had several small-sized species called aprochromines, numbering over, sometimes they say 500 species, some say over 200 species. So they were so small until some ecologists wanted to convert them into a sizable fish. And that's why they introduced alpha. To convert, it's a prayer that to convert this biomass into some fish for angling. They were talking of sport fishes in Lake Victoria. So they did the introduction in the 50s, but it was an ecological disaster because it has led to the loss of so many of these fish species. Some have been introduced also, like Oleochromis niloticus. This is also from the Nile, introduced into Lake Victoria for the fisheries, to improve the fisheries in the lake, including some other introductions. So in total, we have 9, but not all the 9 species are introduced into the lake. This is the Lake Victoria Basin, like we have trout. Trout was introduced into the cold streams draining some mountainous areas in Western Kenya.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it is known that all over the world, especially in Africa, we don't even have a complete database of how many migratory fish species there are. And then with the new introductions done in the 50s into the Lake Victoria from the Nile and other places, why do you think migratory fish is important for the people, especially maybe those whose livelihood is dependent on the Lake Victoria in Kenya, for example? Why is migratory fish important for people?
Yeah, this migration is actually in the 30s, 60s, 50s. There are quite a number of studies done before Kenya got independence. So there are European ecologists who are studying the lower reaches of these rivers. And during the rains, they realized that there was a lot of migrations of fishes from Lake Victoria. And there were fisheries around those periods where local communities, people were actually residing along rivers to take advantage of these migrations. But with the ecological changes that have happened, water's quality has deteriorated. The introduction of these exotic species into lake have reduced the local fish populations. So it's like the migration is really dying. And with it, the livelihoods that comes with the fishes accessing these waters, where people are also able to harvest them for their consumption. So it's very important for the communities that these fishes are able to move from the lake upstream where the peoples are, so that it's a livelihood. And secondly, for ecological reasons, because this reproduction is important to maintain the populations in both in the rivers and in the lake. So it's quite important for ecologically and for livelihoods.
So are you saying that over the years, migration from the lake to the rivers is beginning to reduce? Like there's a decrease in migration. So can we now make new introductions of other species, to create competition and make this other fishes in the lake, get up and doing? What could be the remedy for this?
Obviously, we don't advocate for introduction of exotic species under any circumstances.
Okay.
And the decline is a combination of factors. One is pollution in the rivers.
Okay.
You realize that these fishes, some are quite sensitive to poor water quality or loss of habitat of any kind, like sedimentation. So we have an critically endangered species like Labia victorianus, locally called Ningu, because it's not able to migrate from the lake and rejuvenate populations in the rivers because of this disconnectivity in terms of poor water quality. And also the lake waters have also deteriorated a lot because of eutrophication, sediment input, and nutrients from the catchment. So the only way we can improve these migrations by improving the habitat and water conditions in the rivers. And obviously not blocking the migrations by building dams and other structures that can disconnect the rivers.
Wow. I'm trying to go through some of these species and I see one that has a similar name to mine, the Cynodontis afrofisheri. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, there's the Afro part in that.
The Afro part, yes. It's funny, the names of these fishes. Okay. Okay, so could you explain to us what you mean by environmental flows and, improving to help improve migration? Yes, we understand that dams, especially dams that are no longer useful, maybe they're now redundant in use, should be demolished or removed to allow for easy migration of this migratory fish species. What is the role of environmental flows or environmental reserves? How does this help with increase in the fish species?
Yeah, environmental flows in short terms is maintaining the flows of the water levels in rivers so that the river does not dry before reaching its destination. I think that's the simplest definition.
When you say before reaching its destination, does the river? Okay, I think I've heard about flowing rivers and stagnant rivers. So, talking this destination now, does it mean that every flowing river gets to a point and it stops flowing? I'm trying to understand that.
No, most rivers end up into a lake or the sea or a reservoir or something like that. So if a river turned out to be seasonal because people have removed the excess water before it completes its journey, that's what I was saying. Because we have several rivers actually that are flowing. Traditionally, they were permanent, but because of excessive obstruction of water, they end up drying before completing their journey. So environmental flows is maintaining a given volume of water in the stream for this kind of ecological processes for the communities in the river, and also meeting human needs downstream. You can imagine if people abstract a lot of water upstream until people downstream are not receiving enough water. So that's the essence of environmental flows. And
I'm trying to have a picture in my head.
Yes.
Let's say we have a flowing river that is seasonal, that is meant to empty into the Lake Victoria Basin. And suddenly there's an obstruction, and then it dries up with, fishes in it. Have you experienced that before?
We have not had serious issues with rivers drying up. But what we have experienced, especially there's one river that we have been studying, the Mara River, is that the water levels during the dry season goes so low because of several issues, deforestation upstream, such that the water quality becomes so poor for the fishes. And this is as a result of, we have several hippo populations in the rivers, which defecate. If hippos defecate a lot in streams and rivers, such that we have to dilute their waste with enough water.
Wow.
Otherwise, it becomes toxic for the fishes.
That's
so if the water level, if the water level is not high enough, then this waste becomes toxic for the fishes. And we have had instances of fish dying in the river because of this. During the dry season, water becoming so low.
So we have hippos in rivers?
Yeah, some rivers have hippos.
This big, and I'm wondering, what would they be doing in a seasonal river? Can they survive, or do they migrate before the river starts drying up or something? Are they also migratory?
The hippos or the...
Yes, the hippos.
No, hippos maintain their positions in rivers.
Okay.
So it's during the dry season when there's a lot of water, they move around. But in the dry season, they are in permanent pools because they use the water for thermoregulation. So they must be in the water most of the time. But theatification is continuous. It goes on continuously. So we must have some amount of water to dilute this amount of waste into the system. So that's why we need a given amount of water, called reserve, that should meet all these requirements in terms of maintaining water quality, maintaining the quality that meets the requirements for different fish species. Okay. So when these are not met, then we have these cases of fish deaths and yeah.
Does this not affect the people? Because when there's not enough water to dilute the fecal matter from the hippos, then you have to use a lot of water available. And then what about those people who depend on the river, who probably drink from it or use it for cooking and washing, or maybe for agricultural purposes? How do they cope when the water level is low and then you have to use so much to dilute the hippo's feces?
Yeah, that's why it's critical that, especially for people living downstream, luckily in the Mara, there are not many people living downstream because it's the Masai Mara National Reserve and the Serengeti National Park in Tanzania. But obviously there are people downstream. Then the water quality is quite compromised. So you have cases of cholera and these other things happening, waterborne diseases during the dry season. So that's why it's really important, not only for the fishes, but for people and livestock and wildlife. We have these two national parks for the case of the Mara. So it's really important that this water volume is maintained in the rivers.
It's a really tough work to maintain this lake. Okay, so what's the estimate number of fish species that we could say there are in the Lake Victoria Basin? Do you have an idea?
Yep. Estimates are from the current updates that we have now. In the rivers, we have around 75 species of fishes. But in the lake, because we have lost quite a number of aprochromaine species, the cichlids, so the number's really gone down. There used to be over 200 aprochromaine species, but of late, the number is not really known because some are extinct. But there's also evidence that there are new species that have not been described, especially for the small cyprinids. We have cases in the Mara where some work done by Gordon, and we have collected some species that are under description. We have also recorded a fish recently in one of the streams draining into the lake that has not been recorded before. So meaning that then there's need for more studies to document these species and map their distribution and also identify maybe the concerns in terms of their protection.
Interesting. All right. It's been an eye-opening session, really. But before we round off, could you tell us the roles of people? If I live in Kenya, for example, or I live around the Lake Victoria Basin, what can I do to help with the work that you are doing? What can the people do to enhance or maintain the river flow or the environmental flow to ensure that the rivers, for example, don't dry up and the water levels in the lake is maintained and temperature and, the migratory fish, migrate to the rivers as at when do? What are the roles of people?
Yeah, people, they have a lot to do because, you can, most of these issues can be traced back to the people. Like water obstruction of water from rivers, waste disposal, and solid waste, liquid waste disposal into rivers. So waste management, even at the individual level, do you throw trash anywhere, or do you recycle or handle waste? How do you handle your waste? Then deforestation, especially in the catchment areas where rivers have their sources. There's a lot of clearing of forests. Then this reduces the amount of water during the dry season. Yeah, so these are the kind of, and also awareness creation. Why do we need fishes in the rivers? If there's a fish in the river, that's a clear indication that even that water is good for your consumption. But if there's no fish, then tells you a lot. If there used to be fish in the river and they're no longer there, then you have to question even the quality of the water you are using yourself. So people have a lot to do in terms of awareness creation, waste management, and maintaining the quality of the environment in which they are living.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So as little as proper waste management and disposal and, reducing our pollution activities, it would go a long way to preserving these lakes and rivers.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Frank. I'm just going to do a recap so that if you missed a bit of this, I think Dr. Frank earlier said that the Lake Victoria Basin is the second largest lake in the world. Would that be correct?
Freshwater lake.
Okay, the largest freshwater lake.
Yeah.
And the second largest, you say? Okay. And then you also mentioned migration from freshwater, which is the lake, to rivers, which is also freshwater, and you call them cotamodromous fishes. Am I correct? Yes. Yep. And then you highlighted that in sometime in the 50s, some exotic species for sport fishing were introduced into the lake, and it was a disaster because, of course, I don't think they achieved their aims and objectives with those introduction.
Yeah, because we lost quite the species that they were supposed to convert into biomass. We lost most of them.
So most of the fishes native to the lake were lost.
Yeah, were lost because of this introduction.
Okay. And you also mentioned that sometimes one of the major problems you face is having to use the available water, especially when the water level is low, to dilute the feces of the hippopotamus. Yes. And so when people use this water, it causes waterborne diseases. And then, of course, there's less water for people to consume and all that. And then people can contribute to your work by just, practicing proper waste management and disposal, reducing pollution, and ensuring that whatever we do, of course, whatever trash we discard indiscriminately, 80% of them find their ways to the water body. So the pollution could happen on land, but it would end up in our water bodies. So we need to even take caution what we do from the home front and from the land area.
Yes, and most importantly for the Victoria Basin, people living upstream, they should maintain riparian areas, and deforestation activities should be minimized so that the erosion and the loss of fertilizer and other wastes from the catchment areas are not getting into our water bodies.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Frank Masese. It's been an interesting session with you. And I want to thank you for your time and for all the education you've given us today.
Thank you so much, and welcome.
Okay. All right, viewer, this is how far we can go. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. And my name is Wonne Afronele. I am from Nigeria, and I'll be your regular host for a time, So again, thank you so much, Dr. Frank, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye, Wonne.